My boss brutally fired me after 10 years. A month later, the FBI raided his office. I gave 10 years of my life to my boss, Richard. We were about to close the biggest corporate merger in history. Then, completely out of nowhere, he brutally fired me, humiliated me in front of the whole company, and ruined my reputation. I hated him with everything I had. I gave 10 years of my life to a man who threw me away like garbage. I missed my sister's wedding. I skipped vacations, and I worked 100-hour weeks to build his empire. My boss, Richard, was my mentor, my idol, and the closest thing I had to a father figure. We were 3 days away from the biggest corporate merger in our industry's history, a deal that was supposed to make us both millionaires. But instead of popping champagne, Richard called me into his glass-walled office, looked me dead in the eyes, and fired me. He didn't just let me go, he humiliated me. He accused me of gross incompetence, threatened to sue me, and had security escort me out in front of the entire trading floor. I walked out of that building with my career completely destroyed, carrying a cardboard box of desk toys, consumed by a hatred so deep it physically hurt. I spent the next 4 weeks plotting how I would ruin his life. But what I didn't know was that Richard was already a dead man walking, and that brutal public firing wasn't a betrayal. It was a calculated rescue mission. To understand the shock, you have to understand our relationship. I started in the mailroom of Vanguard Holdings. Richard saw something in me. He plucked me from obscurity, taught me everything about high-stakes acquisitions, and groomed me to be his vice president. We ate lunch together every day. He knew my dog's name. He knew my coffee order. The merger with a massive offshore conglomerate was his magnum opus. For 6 months, we lived in the office. I drafted thousands of pages of contracts. But 3 days before the ink was supposed to dry, the atmosphere shifted. Richard stopped looking at me. He locked his door. When he finally called me in, his face was pale, his eyes completely hollow. He slid a termination agreement across the mahogany desk. "Sign it," he ordered, his voice devoid of any emotion. I asked him what was going on. I asked if it was a joke. He stood up, slammed his hands on the desk, and screamed that I was a liability, a parasite who had been riding his coattails for a decade. He fabricated a story about me mismanaging client funds, and told me if I ever contacted him or anyone at the firm again, he would bury me in litigation. I was escorted through the lobby by 2 massive security guards. The whispers of my colleagues burned into my ears. Overnight, I was blacklisted. My calls to recruiters went unreturned. My industry friends ghosted me. Richard had systematically salted the earth of my professional life. For a month, my life spiraled. I sat in my dark apartment, drinking cheap whiskey, staring at my phone. The merger went through without me. I watched the news coverage as Richard shook hands with the offshore executives, smiling for the cameras. My anger became my only fuel. I started drafting emails to journalists, trying to invent ways to expose him for toxic workplace behavior. I wanted him to hurt the way I was hurting. Then came the Tuesday morning that stopped the world. I woke up to 47 missed calls. I turned on the television, and my jaw hit the floor. Every major news network was broadcasting live aerial footage of Vanguard Holdings. Dozens of black SUVs surrounded the building. FBI agents and windbreakers were carrying out towers of cardboard boxes and computer servers. The headline flashing in bright red across the bottom of the screen read, "Vanguard Holdings raided in multi-billion-dollar fraud and money laundering probe." The anchors reported that the offshore conglomerate was actually a shell company for an international crime syndicate. The merger was a massive, sophisticated laundering operation. But the most shocking news came 5 minutes later. The authorities announced that the CEO, Richard, had suffered a massive, fatal heart attack in his office. See, just moments before the agents breached the doors. I sat on my couch, completely paralyzed. The man I hated most in the world was dead. The company I helped build was a criminal enterprise. I felt a terrifying wave of panic. I was the vice president for 10 years. I drafted those contracts. If they were going down, they were going to drag me down with them. I waited for the knock on my door. I waited for the handcuffs. But the knock didn't come from the FBI. It came from a courier. He handed me a heavy prepaid overnight box. The return address was a P.O. box I didn't recognize, but I recognized the handwriting instantly. It was Richard's. The postage date showed it had been mailed exactly 1 day before the FBI raid. My hands shook violently as I sliced the tape open. Inside, there was a thick manila envelope, a secure USB drive, and a handwritten letter on Richard's personal stationery. The handwriting wasn't the confident, sweeping script I was used to. It was jagged, rushed, and desperate. Kid, if you are reading this, the feds have kicked in the doors, and my heart has finally given out under the stress. I am so incredibly sorry for what I put you through last month. I know you hate me. I needed you to hate me. 6 weeks ago, I found out the truth about the merger. The board of directors had been cooking the books for years, using the offshore deal to wash syndicate money. They trapped me. They told me if I tried to blow the whistle, they would kill my family. They also told me that as my VP, you were going to be the designated fall guy. They were going to forge your signature on the final transfer documents, leaving you facing 20 years in federal prison while they disappeared with the money.